The day after I published my Golden Idol timeline video, the first DLC for the Rise of the Golden Idol came out, meaning my timeline was already out of date. I played the DLC, which is called The Sins of New Wells, and had a lot of fun with it. But now I have to figure out how I'm going to reorganize the timeline. I'm making this video to act as an addendum that will contextualize my timeline video, along with future videos I'm planning to make. While I won't be going over the games in nearly as much detail as in my timeline video, there will be spoilers for games in the Golden Idol series in this video, including Sins of New Wells. So make sure you don't watch this video if you're planning to play any of the games that have been released so far. Also, you should watch my timeline video before watching this one, or else some parts won't make sense. Immediately after playing The Sins of New Wells, I wrote up a script for a separate video about its chronology to act as a sort of extension to the main timeline video. However, I realized there were a few problems with publishing that video. One, I wasn't really able to add much besides just recounting the events of the DLC. This is partly because it already shows events in mostly chronological order, and also because it doesn't provide any specific dates whatsoever. Two, I learned about some short summaries the developers published for all three remaining DLCs scheduled for 2025, and after reading them, I realized that at least two of the DLCs are going to force me to rewrite parts of my original timeline video, which means I might as well include the events of the first DLC in the updated timeline video. Three, some of the biggest questions I had after playing Rise of the Golden Idol still aren't answered, so I will go over those now. Right now, my biggest question by far is, who is this? My working hypothesis before was that it's Echo Secunda in the body of Oriel Toussaint, and that he tracked down the Golden Idol of Xenopolis after seeing the IDOL get destroyed at the end of Rise of the Golden Idol. Unfortunately, the first DLC gives us three major revelations that cast doubt on this hypothesis. One, it turns out Echo Secunda didn't just walk away from the IDOL, but instead scavenged the parts inside and used them to make a new device called the Disarranger. Two, the Disarranger has the same set of inputs as the IDOL, which probably means Echo did not use any parts from the Idol of Xenopolis to make it. Otherwise, we'd see inputs like lifespan and gold. On a side note, I have no idea what scrambling those things would do. Three, at the end of the DLC, Echo has his mind permanently scrambled by the Disarranger and becomes unable to perceive the world around him as anything other than bizarre hallucinations. So it's unlikely he would have the capacity to track down the Idol of Xenopolis after this point. In light of these problems, I racked my brain trying to come up with a particularly compelling explanation of who the silhouette belongs to, when they took the idol, and especially how they managed to find it. Thanks to a comment on my timeline video, I now think I have a rough idea of what is the most likely explanation. But first, I want to go over my speculation for the future DLCs. DLC number 2, the Lamuran Phoenix. So, on the Steam page, we get this description. Royal celebrations gone awry. Amidst the Lemurian aristocracy's extravagant holiday celebrations, a murder ignites a complex conspiracy that reaches back to 1910. Return to the scene of the crime and uncover the truth. Loyal dedicants. As technology fades, spirituality flourishes. Charismatic gurus rise to power, drawing loyal followers with their divine messages. But even those of higher power have their flaws and can't be relied upon to act morally. Under this reign, those who sin face severe consequences. Blood is spilled. Moral compasses aren't always aligned, leading to a power struggle. Alliances built on deceit fall, creating a power imbalance. Only one can emerge victorious and rule the masses. Unravel 5 new scenarios. Explore themes of deceit, wealth, and power in 5 new scenarios spanning from 1910 to 1950. Your pursuit of the truth will lead you through decadent parties, ancient temples, and dangerous rituals. Decipher the prophecy. As you delve deeper into the conspiracy, you'll be challenged to decode cryptic messages and piece together the threads of a mystery that will lead to a shocking revelation. So when I saw the original description, which is a little bit different than this, the first thing that jumped out at me wasn't in the description itself, but in this silhouette that we see in the background for the DLC. So I'll admit, at that point I had lost some confidence in my ability to recognize people by their silhouettes, but that person hovering in the background looked a lot like Tessa Navarri's mentor, who we see in a photo in Chapter 3, Case 3 of Rise. And now that there's more information about the game, it looks like I was right. If you look at the Steam page, you can see what looks like a picture of the same character. He looks like exactly the same person in the photo. Also, while this new description has a lot more information than the previous one I was going to talk about, there are a couple of missing things. The original description had a reference to India, which was intriguing, because if this is a part of the game's story, that would be the first time the Golden Idol universe has referred to a country using a name that also exists in our world, although this has happened for continents such as Europe. It's notable that the game ends in 1950 when Tessa took a photo with her mentor. Maybe the events in that photo are important, maybe the shooting star is important, who knows. It's not close to any other important events in our timeline, but maybe it'll tie into the rediscovery of some of the Lemurian artifacts that we see in Rise of the Golden Idol. The fact that we're focusing on Lemurian aristocracy means we should get some insight into the state of modern Lemuria as it exists in Rise of the Golden Idol. Maybe the nation is ruled by a monarch, or maybe the aristocracy is more of a symbolic thing. Aside from Tessa's mentor, none of the characters in the screenshots look familiar to me, so I'm guessing they're all new characters who are unrelated to anything we've seen in the game so far. There is this one character next to Tessa's mentor, who could just be a younger Tessa. Honestly, she kind of looks like Peggy Hill, but I'm guessing that's a coincidence. I guess we'll find out who that is in the game. The paragraph about charismatic gurus acting immorally is interesting, if a bit ambiguous. When it says those who sin face severe consequences, does that mean the gurus are immoral because they punish sins too harshly? Or is it saying that those gurus are the ones sinning and they'll face the consequences? And for that matter, what sins are we talking about? In this series, sinning within the context of Lemuria usually means using a universal transfer device to harm other people. But then again, this is probably a very different Lemurian culture than we've seen before. There's also the line, as technology fades, spirituality flourishes, which reminds me a lot of the Lankan religious practices that we see in The Spider of Lanka. It makes it sound like people have forgotten how ancient Lemurian technology actually worked and mythologized it as some kind of magic or miracles. Based on the Steam page alone, it's hard to find any clues that I can connect to the larger lore of the series. However, the title itself seems to hint very strongly at the possibility of total memory override. The Lamuran Phoenix sounds very similar to the Lemurian Vampire, which referred to someone using a universal transfer device to steal life from others in order to live forever, taking on the role of a vampire. A phoenix, on the other hand, leaves behind an egg after it dies, and when that egg hatches, it's the same bird being reborn. That sounds like exactly what happened to Echo Secunda, with the egg being equivalent to a Lemurian memory disk. My best guess is that the story will revolve around a plot to resurrect an ancient dead Lemurian, who is similarly preserved on a disk, or possibly even Echo Secunda himself. If so, the next question is how the memories are supposed to be extracted from the disk. It could be that the artifacts used to make the IDOL in the Rise base game were originally part of a working universal transfer device with the memory input before it was disassembled, and it ended up in the museum where Arthur Blythe stole those pieces. This would explain the massive coincidence of Arthur getting his hands on a complete set of parts that could be used to assemble a working device. They were already from the same device. It could also explain Echo Secunda's memory disk being in the museum. It might have been found near the parts from the transfer device, because that was the very transfer device he used to get his memories onto the disk. If that's the case, I would imagine the archaeological site where the disk and the parts were found was sort of a free-for-all between various parties, including the museum and the Seven Seas Company. At that point, the only real coincidence left is that Aurelia Winston managed to win the auction, and that's a pretty small coincidence considering there were only 5 people bidding. That being said, all of this is speculation, and while I think full memory transfer will probably be a plot point somehow based on the title, I don't think there's a strong reason to say whether the Lemurian Phoenix will be about resurrecting Echo Secunda himself or someone else. It could also be just another copy of Echo stored on a different disk, which could be a fun twist. Who knows? We'll just have to play it and find out. DLC number 3, Codename Inquisition. When reports of the unlawful use of Lemurian technology begin to surface, an Inquisition squad is sent to investigate. But are they truly immune to the idol's influence? Explore a world before modern technology and catch a glimpse at the world during the creation of the artifact itself in Codename Inquisition. To me, this sounds like potentially the most exciting DLC, as it will finally show us more of ancient Lemurian civilization, and possibly how it fell. I imagine the cases will show us a few different characters, and try to keep us guessing which one is Echo Secunda, since we don't know what he looks like, only to reveal him at the very end. Actually, I'm not sure we have confirmation that Echo Secunda isn't a woman, so maybe that'll be the twist. Either way, it seems to hint that someone in the Inquisition squad is going to use the idol to commit some kind of crimes, which sounds very similar to what we already know about Echo Secunda. The description also says we'll see the creation of the artifact itself, which sounds like that's the invention of the first universal transfer device. If that's the one Echo used, that means it has the memory input, but not the lifespan input. I like to imagine that the Golden Idol of Xenopolis was created much later, and was actually considered a safer version, with the power to transfer life and death being considered child's play in light of what a total memory transfer device can do. DLC number 4, Codename Expedition. Set shortly after the events of the Case of the Golden Idol, follow a group of explorers as they set off on a seafaring adventure to discover a fabled and supposedly cursed treasure of a lost pirate captain. It's all hands on deck in Codename Expedition. First off, I want to predict that the ship shown in the silhouette is the same one that we see in the final case of Case of the Golden Idol, the one that has a cannon missing after Peter Batley wins it while gambling. That would mean that the ship belongs to John Breege, because he's the one that Peter won the cannon from, and presumably the captain or owner of the ship. We know very little about John Breege, having only seen him in the final case and in Case 4. He and the people he hangs out with at the Little Mermaid Inn have something of a seafaring sailor kind of vibe, so I guess it makes sense to put them on a seafaring adventure. As for the fabled and cursed treasure, maybe it's the Golden Idol of Xenopolis, with the rumors about it having morphed over the centuries. Monkey Paw Island does seem like a natural destination for that kind of adventure, especially with the name. If this is the case, it would be pretty unfortunate for our adventurers because, as we already know, the Golden Idol was sold to an Aquitanian pawn shop by this point, and is not out on the high seas. Now that I've gone over my speculation for the DLCs, we can get back to that goddamn silhouette. Like I mentioned earlier, a user named MalcolmW121 left a comment in my last video, which made me rethink everything and land on a new explanation of the scene. Here is that user's comment. To me, the silhouette in the cutscene you mentioned looks more like the head of Tessa Navari. The face is very round, unlike Echo's, i.e. Oriel's angular face, and Tessa also has very messy hair. This would suggest to me that Case's Golden Idol would be the inspiration for Tessa's quest to research and then recreate an idol. Chronologically then, it would be fitting that this plays right before we meet Tessa properly the first time in 2-1, and see the outcome of her research. So, the silhouette being Tessa makes a lot of sense from its storytelling perspective. But I had issues with the idea that Tessa found a golden idol, given that all the parts used for the new idol seem to have been stolen by Arthur Blythe. However, going back over Tessa's quest for the idol, I noticed something interesting. Every reference to Tessa's quest, both by the characters and by the narration, talks about her reconstructing the idol, not finding it. Obviously, this makes sense by the time she's traveling around with Arthur and collecting artifacts, but even in places like her radio interview, the idea of finding the Golden Idol of Xenopolis doesn't even come up as a possibility. Also, there's this cutscene of a television show that acts as a sort of refresher for the events of Case of the Golden Idol. We see a rendition that looks nothing like the Idol of Xenopolis. We're told there are rumors Lazarus Hearst used it to rise to power and that it could grant eternal life, but that these are now known to be myths. So we have a lot of sources showing a mainstream consensus that the Golden Idol of Lazarus Hearst never existed at all. Meanwhile, Tessa thinks it did exist, but that it couldn't grant eternal life. She tries to rebuild it, but for some reason doesn't seem to consider searching for the original. Finally, we know that someone with a silhouette similar to hers ends up finding the Golden Idol right where the Aquitanian man left it at some unknown point in time. As that comment says, I now believe the silhouette belonged to Tessa, and that this event was what led to her quest to rebuild the idol. I believe the scene will take place in the second DLC, or possibly after it, and that Tessa didn't initially know what the idol was when she found it. After that, maybe the idol was destroyed or otherwise determined to be completely unusable. Maybe it fell into lava or something, who knows? And then sometime after that, she learned about it and made the connection, which is what began her quest. I also managed to spot something new, which is that in the original cutscene where Alistair sells the idol, there's text in the background which says Prêteur Storage, meaning storage lender in French. Oddly, that text is missing when we see the scene again in Rise of the Golden Idol. I don't think this helps much with our theory crafting, though. Before I wrap up this video, there's one absolutely unhinged theory I have that I want to go over, even though it's almost certainly wrong. This is just on the off chance that I'm right, and I end up kicking myself for not including it in this video. So in the third case of the Sins of New Wells, called Raid, Echo Secunda and a bunch of gangsters escape from a building while the police are storming it. By solving the case, we learn that they crossed a girder into a nearby building, went down into the parking garage, and escaped in the gangster's signature car. There's an ornithopter in the background, which seems to serve as a red herring to make it harder to guess what vehicle they used. Now, bear with me, because this is really a stretch, but it has been bothering me regardless. You see how the ornithopter lines up at the top of the building on the left? Imagine being at the top of that building and looking towards the ornithopter, and picture what angle you would see it from and how far away it would be. Now look again at the silhouette panel. Obviously, it's completely insane to think that the gangsters stopped in the middle of fleeing the police to let Echo go up to the top of the building, get the idol of Sinopolis, and come back down before driving away again. Also, how would he know it was there? How would the police not catch up? It makes slightly more sense if he found it before the car chase, but then that doesn't explain why he wouldn't have it in the same building where he was experimenting with the disarranger. Also, there's no indication that the Aquitanian man sailed across the Atlantic Ocean with the idol to New Wells, and realistically we're probably seeing it in Albion or Aquitania, which are on a completely different continent. The whole idea makes zero sense, but I felt like I had to go over it just to get it out of my head, because it was driving me crazy. Anyway, since it looks like the DLCs will interfere significantly with the timeline that I've written, I'm going to hold off on revising it until all of them have been released, at which point I'll make a new, updated video which covers the entire timeline. This means I won't be able to release it until sometime after Q3 of 2025. I also want to make lots of changes to it for like the pacing and understanding the events of the story better, and also incorporate corrections that you guys have made in the comments. Thank you for that. And in the meantime, I'll probably make some shorter videos talking about various things that come up over the course of the DLCs, along with any theories that I come up with. I'm also planning to make some character analysis videos. Thank you for all of your informative comments, and thanks for watching.